The stories you don't, forgotten battles, hidden heroes, untold truths.
It is the deadliest weapon in the world, the Kalashnikov. The feared assault rifle has been present in nearly every conflict for more than 70 years. On the side of armies, just as much as on the side of freedom fighters or terrorists. Almost all modern Russian assault and machine guns are based on the invention of Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov. But what is the myth of this weapon made of? A mission by the Russian Special Forces unit Spetsnaz, one of the toughest and most experienced combat units in the Russian army. They have access to many modern weapons, yet they trust above all one, the Kalashnikov.
And there are practically no cases of jamming, misfires, or anything of the sort. In my years of service, I never experienced such a case. Well, what more is there to say? According to a very high estimate, 105 million automatic rifles are manufactured in Izhevsk and other factories in Russia or abroad, with or without a license, I believe.
По-моему, 105 миллионов этих автоматов.
A soldier's weapon must function reliably under any condition. The Kalashnikov was used during the Vietnam War, not only by the Viet Cong, but also by American soldiers.
The Americans sent their forces to Vietnam. There they lost more men than during the Second World War in Europe. When American soldiers had the chance to capture an AK, and there was no major problem with ammunition, they left their M16s behind. For jungle fighting, they preferred the AK, because an AK works, always and everywhere.
In the Hollywood film Lord of War with Nicolas Cage, director Andrew Niccol staged the myth of the assault rifle in meticulous detail.
So, this film mentions the flag of Mozambique. That means freedom fighters there fought with this machine gun and then had it put on the flag of Mozambique. After this film, the government wanted to remove the weapon, but a vote was held and it was decided to keep it. There are such funny stories.
The Mozambique flag has three things in its emblem. The Kalashnikov with bayonet stands for defense and vigilance, the hoe for farmers and their produce, the book for education.
Someone who was in power at the time came up with this symbol. The country gained its independence from Portugal in the mid-1970s through a revolution. And at that moment, it was apparently decided to put the weapon that had been part of that project on the flag alongside a peaceful symbol of agriculture. The hoe and the Kalashnikov thus became the symbol of this country.
The coat of arms of East Timor also features an AK-47.
In almost every photo, terrorists too are holding a Kalashnikov. Bin Laden also made a point of being photographed with one. And of course the Taliban in Afghanistan. Yes, in Afghanistan the Kalashnikov assault rifle is viewed more positively than in the West. In the archive footage from the war in the late 80s, everyone has a submachine gun. Even children. Just like a pack of cigarettes here, a lighter, a smartphone. It's everywhere. We have gun laws, but for them it's apparently normal.
Vienna, 2021. Terrorists, such as the IS sympathizer Quitem F, also relied on the Kalashnikov. He killed 4 people and injured many more before being shot by police. His weapon? An old AK-47. The Kalashnikov was also revered by villains such as Saddam Hussein. He had it gold-plated.
For terrorists, the Kalashnikov is precious. Let us recall Russian head of state Khrushchev, a Komsomol Trotskyite. It did not bother him that Bokassa was a murderous dictator, because he was building socialism after all. Khrushchev gave him money and weapons. This is how it came about that in Somalia and Ethiopia both separatists and government troops had Kalashnikovs.
The Kalashnikov is cheap and easy to manufacture. Its essential characteristics have changed little since 1947. A study by the Swiss specialist publisher Small Arms Survey shows that global market prices for an AK-47 range from $200 to $1,200 depending on whether it is an original or a copy. The study further found that lower weapon prices increase the risk of civil war, and that countries with porous borders, such as in Africa, generally have lower weapon prices, and that the collapse of the Soviet Union appears to have had no significant impact in the trend in gun prices. Experts consider this last point in particular to be remarkable. Moscow. The Kalashnikov concern is present here too. The company has caught up on the technological gap. Today, it is one of the largest in the Russian defense sector. Using state-of-the-art methods, it no longer produces only weapons. For example, it also makes electric motorcycles. The company was restructured.
In 2013, our company received the name Kalashnikov Concern. We are still a weapons concern. In the meantime, we also manufacture other products that were not previously in such focus. First and foremost, of course, high-precision missile systems and unmanned aerial systems. We also have machine tool construction. Tool manufacturing is part of it. We develop military boats and many other systems.
В первую очередь, конечно, это высокоточные ракетные комплексы, беспилотные летательные системы, станкостроение, производство инструмента.
But the concern cannot, or is not permitted, to sell its products everywhere. In many countries, you can buy Kalashnikov weapons almost exclusively for sport or hunting.
Since the liberalization of relations with the West, a large number of civilian products have been developed on the basis of the AK-47. Initially, this involved cooperation primarily with the USA, but also with countries in the Eurozone. Many years ago, sanctions were installed against us. That has nothing to do with fair market politics. That's why we lost some military markets.
Санкционные ограничения, и, в общем-то, это не имеет никакого отношения, скажем так, к честной конкуренции, но, тем не менее, мы действительно потеряли эти рынки сбыта.
Because knockoffs, cheap, unlicensed copies, like these from the Peshawar district of Pakistan, are flooding the market. Here, craftsmen using the most basic tools are mass-producing replicas, primarily of the AK-47. These handmade pieces can be purchased after a test fire behind the house for around $350. The company has made a YouTube series about this, in which an expert examines these weapons.
I discovered things in these rifles I never thought possible. On the weapons from Iraq, the AK-47 magazine had 3/16 of an inch of play. It wouldn't have been able to load. And it couldn't have fired. There's nothing you can do except hit it with your left hand.
То есть вы примыкаете магазин, дергаете затвор, нажимаете на спуск, а выстрела нет. И сделать ничего невозможно. Только вручную, может быть, левой рукой прижимать постоянно магазин к ствольной коробке.
Millions of these poor quality cheap copies gave the Kalashnikov company unbeatable competition on the world market. Until 1990, copies were controlled through licensing by the then Soviet Union to socialist states.
Since then, all license agreements have expired. Nevertheless, in most of these countries, unlicensed products continue to be manufactured under the Kalashnikov brand. That is, of course, very frustrating. But we find no way to exert influence on these producers and return to civilized conditions.
Сейчас найти рычагов, каким образом воздействовать на данных производителей и вернуться, скажем так, в рамках цивилизованных договоренностей.
The company's most important plant is located in Izhevsk, the capital of the Russian Republic of Udmurtia, just under 2 flight hours east of Moscow. Almost everything in Izhevsk is connected to the enormous weapons factory, and therefore to the name Kalashnikov. It's visible right at the city entrance. Inventor Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov, here in 2009 on his dacha. Born in 1919, he is regarded in Russia as a folk hero.
One must keep moving, do something. I fight moles. And I feed birds. Yes, since we're talking about moles, let me show you. I make my own traps. Let me show them to you. This is the latest one. It's from a few days ago. This is to keep it from running away. You see, I am a ruthless designer.
As a soldier in a tank unit, Kalashnikov took part in World War II. Many German combat units already had machine guns at that time, such as the Waffen-SS, which operated with small mobile units, and the MG-42, the so-called Hitler's buzzsaw, moving along different sections of the front. It could fire up to 1,200 rounds per minute. How devastating that could be, Kalashnikov had experienced himself at the front.
The German soldiers were all well mobilized. They had conquered several countries. They were modern equipped for the time. What about us? We essentially had no weapons, only the outdated Mosin rifle. That's why we suffered heavy losses. There were some brief skirmishes. The Germans fired on us. We fired back. In one of these fights, I was wounded. After that, I went to the hospital. That was the reason I began thinking about an invention.
After his serious wound, Kalashnikov began making his first designs. He was not an engineer and not a skilled draftsman. He needed help from others.
Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov came to Izhevsk for the first time in 1948. That was when mass production of the assault rifle began. Kalashnikov became a very important part of the city's history. It is thanks to him that the streets in the city center were paved. After he invented the assault rifle, he was awarded the Stalin Prize. He received a car. But it turned out to be extremely difficult to drive through the city because the car gets stuck everywhere for 8 months of the year. And so, as a deputy, he fought in every respect for Izhevsk and helped the people who came to him.
Kalashnikov lived with his family on the 3rd floor until his death in 2013. From here, he drove to the enormous weapons factory in Izhevsk. Within the complex, 500 employees work on rifles alone every day. Production continues despite Western sanctions. The order books are well filled for years ahead, with a total volume of 50 billion US dollars, roughly 45 billion euros. The company, which since 2018 has no longer been majority state-owned, produces not only Kalashnikov assault rifles, but also civilian hunting weapons, sporting weapons, and drones. The unconventional kamikaze drone fires no ammunition. It can be guided with pinpoint precision to its target. With such high-tech products, the company aims to open up new international markets. But the Kalashnikovs remain the core business.
We are in the assembly hall of the Kalashnikov company. Here, both civilian and military firearms are produced. At this particular workstation, the weapons are assembled. We call that a wedding. That's when the receiver and the barrel are put together. Afterward, the weapons receive a serial number and are registered in the firearms registry.
By now, there are many different variants of the assault rifle. The newest, the AK-12, has just been presented to the public and delivered to the Russian army.
The famous new design is the AK-12 assault rifle, which is based on this rifle. It has already been delivered to our armed forces. It is a series-produced assault rifle. The Vityaz submachine gun was also developed on the basis of the Kalashnikov assault rifle for anti-terror and police units, a light and compact weapon that enables deployment in urban environments, without fear of ricochets and excessive penetration that could have fatal consequences.
While the AK-47 is a mechanical rifle, the new AK-12 features a great deal of additional electronics and is thus a high-tech product of the 21st century.
Weapons are changing. Enormous advances are being made in firing systems. It is possible to shoot at night, to detect warm targets, and to shoot under conditions that were previously completely impossible, in total darkness. But as for the weapon itself and its design, not much has changed since then. The new models are designed above all to be compatible with modern sighting systems, to be more comfortable and ergonomic. But all modern weapon designs in our country and abroad are based on developments from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, because nobody has done it better.
And how exactly does an AK-47 work? When the trigger is pulled, the hammer is released and strikes the pin. The pin strikes the cartridge. Ignition of the propellant is triggered. Expanding gases force the gas piston backwards. The bolt carrier moves back and ejects the projectile. The bolt carrier pushes a new cartridge from the magazine into the barrel. The bolt carrier pushes the hammer back to its starting position. The sear holds the hammer in place until the bolt carrier strikes the pin. The sear holds the hammer until the bolt carrier is back in position. To fire automatically, the selector is moved to the middle position. This holds back the disconnector and prevents it from holding the hammer back. The result? Sustained fire. Kalashnikov and his colleagues devised this mechanical principle. In 1948, the first prototype was ready.
The entire interplay of these parts and mechanisms was refined to be acceptable for military use and to be mass-produced on the assembly line in a factory. Very hard work, as there were frequent problems. The steel grade had to be chosen optimally so that the bolt would not break when the trigger was struck. In the early phase, the springs broke frequently. So they tried and tried. That means they accumulated design experience.
Mikhail Kalashnikov had to deal throughout his life with the worldwide myth that he had not invented the AK-47 himself.
There are more and more people now who say, Kalashnikov didn't write his books himself. He copied everything, and so on. They will certainly say that he didn't invent the automatic rifle. During his time here, he only developed 150 prototypes, and they were not accepted. But this is my creation. It is based on my invention. I have always pushed these experiments forward. With each one, we developed something new, and so on. It's a fine specimen, one I made as a staff sergeant, a submachine gun.
Time and again, it was claimed that Kalashnikov could only have invented the AK-47 with the help of the German engineer Hugo Schmeisser. Schmeisser had been involved in the development of the famous Wehrmacht Sturmgewehr 44 and, like many other weapons designers, was deported by the Russians after the war. But what truth is there to this myth?
Behind me stands the house on Krasnaya Street. It is sometimes also called the House of the German Engineers, who lived here from October 1946 to 1952. A group of German engineers did indeed work at the machine factory in Izhevsk. There is a very peculiar version of events, claiming that they were involved in the development of the AK Kalashnikov. But this version does not stand up to scrutiny. The fact is that the development of the automatic rifle did not take place in Izhevsk at all, but in the city of Kovrov, 1,000 kilometers away.
Only later was the AK-47 manufactured in Izhevsk. The origin of this myth is the Sturmgewehr 44, known as the STG-44 for short. It looks very similar to the Kalashnikov, but there are differences, not only in the ammunition.
First, the MP-44 assault rifle. Disassembly begins by removing the magazine. To do this, press the button located on the left side of the receiver. Press the button and remove the magazine. The magazine housing is removed from the Kalashnikov receiver by pressing down the latch on the underside of the receiver, pulling the magazine forward and taking it out. Regarding the weapon's controls, the safety switch of the Schmeisser MP is located on the underside of the receiver, and the firing mode selector is activated with a button.
То есть два разных элемента, два разных действия. Снятие с предохранителя и переключение режимов огня.
The Kalashnikov assault rifle has the same function. In this case, it is on safety mode. Moving upward puts the rifle into automatic fire mode, and downward into single action mode. So here, no similarities.
То есть ничего общего.
And while the Schmeisser rifle is made of stamped individual parts, the central piece of the AK-47 is milled from a block of metal. The archives contain astonishing information about the engineer Hugo Schmeisser and his time as a prisoner of war in Russia.
And while some engineers were interested and willing to work, others, such as Schmeisser, had no desire to continue working in Izhevsk, and he sabotaged this work in a flagrant manner. Others worked with commitment, lived here with their families. They even sent their children to school here. Moreover, Schmeisser was here, in Izhevsk. While the actual invention and testing under Mikhail Kalashnikov took place in Kovrov, 1,000 kilometers away.
In East Germany, the Kalashnikov was the weapon of the army, the police, and the border troops. Images from an NVA maneuver. But the rifles did not come from Russia. They were manufactured in East Germany under license. In this former factory in Annaberg-Buchholz, near Wiesa in Saxony,
Apparently, given the geopolitical situation, it was decided that this was acceptable. On the other hand, the topic of the foreign production of Kalashnikov rifles is a largely unknown, unexplored, and very interesting subject.
Так что, думаю, еще многие годы буду вести какие-то по ней исследования и обязательно отвечу на ваш вопрос лет через 10.
Here in the Erzgebirge Mountains, a kind of high-tech weapons factory was operated under strict secrecy in the 80s. It bore the name GWB. Only the closest employees knew that Kalashnikov brand assault rifles were being produced here under license, among other things. The operation was more productive and far more modern than the other factories in East Germany.
The VEB, Geräte- und Werkzeugbau Wiesa, was one of the largest enterprises in Annaberg-Buchholz and the region. It did a great deal for its community, for its employees. They had correspondingly good salaries. There were nurseries, there were company doctors, there were company flats. There was a direct shuttle in peak commuting hours.
Wolfgang Berghäuser worked as an engineer at the GWB and was thereby bound to the strictest secrecy. In these buildings, he and his colleagues worked until the fall of the wall. Above all, on the Kalashnikov.
This is a connecting passage where the weapons were transported on trolleys from the assembly area down to the test range, where they were then test-fired and checked as part of final inspection.
The path to the shooting range. No ordinary GDR citizen had access here. Instead, senior military officers sometimes came. What happened here attracted particular interest from this man, Alexander Schalk-Golodkowski. He belonged to the inner circle around Erich Honecker. Schalk-Golodkowski was supposed to use his GDR company KOKO to procure hard currency, above all for the workers' and farmers' state. A different caliber was used in the West. For this reason, at the end of the 80s, the GWB developed an assault rifle using NATO ammunition.
That was the Uyghur 940. That was a completely different weapon. It was based on the same basic principle, but through the use of a different cartridge. Of course, the whole ballistics had to be recalculated, redesigned. And a new design had to be created, so that the weapon could also be sold where it was intended to be sold. That means producing a completely new weapon within just under 2 years. That was quite a challenge. Bearing in mind that the weapon was not only produced by us, but that many individual components came from other enterprises.
Based on the AK-47. Secured behind high walls, the GDR's engineers created the Uyghur 940 in record development time, a large new assault rifle that the NVA immediately tested in a large-scale trial. Secret video recordings from the NVA at the time document this. In a drop test, the weapon is thrown to the ground several times from a height of 2 meters, including directly onto the barrel. Yet the soldier can pick the weapon up again and continue firing. Very few weapons at the time passed such a test at all. The Uyghur assault rifle series combined the robust technology of the AK-47 with modern GDR engineering expertise.
The absolute and enormous reliability, to fire under all circumstances, whether mud, sand, water, ice, and thus deliver the practical value expected, including in the interchangeability of parts. That means, if in an emergency you find a weapon somewhere and yours is broken, you can quite easily swap some parts and continue using the weapon, and in its long service life, and all that with very good precision in hitting the target.
The Vega fires with NATO ammunition and, unlike the AK-47, is equipped with modern plastic grips. With this weapon, the GDR engineers and the GWB wanted to keep their modern facility fully occupied.
And on the one hand, there was a highly modern machine park that needed to be kept busy. And so there was the consideration: how could one circumvent the licenses with an appropriate modification and create a weapon that could also be exported to Western countries? And that is really how the idea of the Vega was born. We basically wanted to use the machine park. The NVA's demand is at some point satisfied. And with this new caliber, I would then have larger markets, because I also have the problem. If, say, I could even export the AK-74 and wanted to go into non-socialist economic countries, then I would have to supply them with ammunition.
The blurred test footage of the time does not capture everything, but the Vega was a complete success. It was a masterpiece of the engineering art of the day. It was extremely robust and equal to, if not superior to, the Western weapons of the time. The GDR police received a number of units, as did the NVA. There was optimism.
All the others failed. Something no longer worked, something jammed, and the Vega kept functioning under all those harsh conditions. And India, as the third or fourth largest army in the world, would not have put in a provisional order for 10 million units without reason. They also think through the why and wherefore in advance.
Not only India, but also Chile and other larger countries placed orders. They were won over by the modern concept and the robustness, made in the GDR. Special models such as this one were chosen.
With the standard Kalashnikov, the problem was that the handguard is relatively short, and the danger exists that during an operation you keep grabbing the hot barrel. That's why the designers, the equipment works at WISA or the design enterprise, said we have to lengthen the entire handguard somewhat so that the risk of accidentally grabbing the warm barrel is kept relatively low. And then the topic I want to raise as well, the extendable stock. I have spacer pieces. One spacer is fitted here, you can see it, secured with a screw. And I can also add several spacers, which basically has the practical advantage that I can adjust the rifle to the shooter, depending on how long their arm is. When I compare it again, perhaps with the M16, where I can partially slide the stock, I ask myself, if I now have to deploy in rough terrain, I'll be permanently shifting my stock in combat. And I always say, every screw and every mechanism is one too many for that sort of thing. The Vega is kept simple. Compared to other weapons, as you can see, there are few points of attack for dirt to get in. It was designed so that there are few surfaces where dirt can accumulate. That's also why it worked so well. Once it was buried, dug back up covered in mud, and then quickly worked again.
The Vega units that made it out of the GDR to other countries were transported from this secret weapons depot in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern to the port of Rostock and shipped out. Then the wall fell. In 1990, angry citizens stormed the warehouse belonging to Schalk Golodkovsky's company. In the crates they found Kalashnikovs and Vega rifles. Reinhard Vormelker was among those present.
There we stood in those mountains of crates. You cannot imagine it. The GDR always seemed so peaceful and solitary and whatnot. And in the 7th Yearbook for Peace Research of 1989, the GDR is still listed as a country that does not trade in weapons. That's how secretly the whole story unfolded. You can see from the grounds here how secret it really was. And then it all escalated. So we essentially removed the guards and the IMI-ST. There was a citizens committee that kept watch, together with the police and the People's Navy, to make sure nothing disappeared. Just imagine if people had broken in. It still makes me sick to this day. And then we gradually ensured that the People's Navy carted it all away.
Und dann haben wir langsam durchgesetzt, dass die Volksmarine das abfährt.
Where all these weapons ended up is unknown, as is where the weapons shipped from Rostock went. Now and then, a Vega still surfaces, such as this one in 2020 at a weapons market in Libya. The dream of hard currency was quickly over. Although Wolfgang Berghäuser and the entire GWB workforce had hoped at the time that the Vega would be a compelling reason to keep the factory open. But it turned out differently. The federal government decided to discontinue the entire production program.
The documents were destroyed by the WTS Koblenz, the military technology collection, in 2003 on the orders of the Ministry of Defense, and in turn they received their instructions from Russia or its successor state, because there are even earlier letters on the matter. All the licensed documents should actually have been destroyed at the time of reunification, because after the FRG's withdrawal from the Warsaw Pact, there were no longer any rights to hold data or tools for manufacturing Kalashnikovs under license, and unfortunately the Vega documents were also packed in those crates and were thereby destroyed along with them.
Neither the Bundeswehr, which also received a number of units, nor the military technology collection, responsible for the equipment, is willing to comment on the Vega complex on camera. The federal government is paying heavy contractual penalties to the countries that had already placed orders and can now not be supplied. In 2002, Mikhail Kalashnikov himself came here. Western armies equipped, of all things, with weapons based on his inventions. That was apparently something nobody wanted.
The impression I gained was that he was a very modest man. In his conversations, he was also very, very friendly, kind, open, and made it known, if he had known what would one day become of his weapon, he would never have designed it.
Perhaps it was images like these that made Kalashnikov more reflective towards the end of his life. Throughout his life, he had been happy to accept the many honors bestowed on him, as here in 2009. For a long time, he had tolerated no criticism of the AK-47.
Присвоено звание Героя Российской Федерации Калашникову Михаилу Тимофеевичу.
I only wish I were not such a wreck that, as everyone says, I can barely drag myself out of the house. I want to be on my feet, just go somewhere, where someone would tell me that I have to do it one more time. Then I would only walk that path. That is the path I would take.
In 2013, Mikhail Kalashnikov died at the age of 94 in Izhevsk. The AK-47 and its many successors keep firing.
It is not as if Mr. Kalashnikov assembled something wild in a tinkering workshop, something that rattles and so on. The Kalashnikov does rattle, of course, or has corresponding play, but all of that was designed from the outset so that the relevant components, the mechanisms, have the freedom they need, so that when dirt gets in, it still functions.
Even Vladimir Putin promotes this indestructible weapon. It will remain a phenomenon, even though its invention is 70 years in the past.
This story was presented by Adler Militaria.